State Affairs.
State Affairs with Edmond O'Neill.
Welcome to another class of history, politics, and power. In today's class, we will be looking at the Orkar Coup, military revolution, and the laws of motion. That is the subject of this class. The Orkar Coup, military revolution, and the laws of motion. If you remember that night, it was a night heavy with melodies of change in the arena of the coup plotters. What happened that night? Soldiers moved in the shadows. Their boots were silent on the hot Nigerian soil. These soldiers had a dream. It was a dream to reshape Nigeria. But I hope you know, dreams can turn to dust before the sun rises. This is the story of the Orkar Coup. A bold strike, a strike of revolution. But it came with a heavy price. It is the price of failure. It was in April 1990. A group of young military officers led by Major Gideon Orkar. But behind the scene, they say the leader of the coup is Colonel Inyam. But Major Gideon Orkar announced the coup. He that announces the coup is not necessarily the leader of the coup, but he can also be the leader of the coup. That is not in contention now. So on the 22nd of April, 1990, this group of young military officers decided to take action. They were tired of corruption. They were tired of leaders who cared more for power than the people they governed. They believed Nigeria needed a fresh start. Their plan was simple: seize control, remove the government, and begin anew. On the 9th of April 22nd, 1990, they struck. Gunfire echoed in Lagos. Babangida ran helter-skelter. Tanks rode onto the streets. The rebels took over radio stations announcing their revolution to the nation. It's like, we act for the people, they declared. No more oppression, no more lies. Does that remind you of the Orkar Coup of 1966? Somehow, both coups have been tagged revolutionary coups. Why? It's about the Gideon Orkar Coup, military revolution, and the laws of motion. For a few hours, it seemed like victory was near for the coupists. But in a twist of fate, the course of history was redefined. It was the fall. Dreams came crumbling, and the coup piece ran helter-skelter. It is about power. Who gets what? Why? If you listen to the coup speech delivered by Gideon Orkar, they detailed why they struck. It's a different coup. It is the only coup that stands out in the history of Nigeria. It stands out because the intention was to break up the country. These coups were mainly from the minority zones of Nigeria. They refused dominance and they decided to strike. They almost got Babangida. They almost killed him because they killed his ADC. Babangida escaped by the whiskers. Abacha rose to the challenge. Military revolution and the laws of motion. It's about power. It's about politics. Look, I have talked about this book before. It is entitled Destiny Anchored on Faith, the story of General Oladipo Dia. It's a book written by Oluronti Afowowe, Dr. Oluronti Afowowe. In Dr. Oluronti Afowowe's book, he talks about the Orkar Coup. He explains how Dia paid the price too. So, as we walk down history lane, it is better we learn from them. Dr. Oluronti Afowowe is the author of Destiny Anchored on Faith, the story of General Oladipo Dia. The Gideon Orkar Coup of 1990 changed everything in Nigeria's military politics. I want to read a book to you. The author says, on April 19th, 1990, there was a botched coup d'etat. The execution of the coup, generally called the Orkar Coup, was very ferocious. Many lives were lost. The significance of the coup was that it gave political expression to the resentment of the minority ethnic groups against the perceived Hausa Fulani hegemonistic control of political power in Nigeria. I just read from the book Destiny Anchored on Faith, the story of General Oladipo Dia, written by Oluronti Afowowe. He is my guest on State Affairs. Dr. Afowowe, it's good to have you on State Affairs.
It's a pleasure to be your guest. I'm very grateful.
You know, while reading this book and I came to this chapter where you talked about the Orkar Coup, it reminded me of a coup that had the capacity to change the ethnic argument in Nigeria. Let's reflect on that coup. How did that coup change military politics in this country?
We need to have a sense of history to be able to appreciate what the Orkar Coup did to Nigerian politics and indeed Nigerian military. Hitherto, there was a semblance of unity within the military. I mean, by virtue of their training, orientations, the military were supposed to be, in quote, highly patriotic human beings who do not have ethnic sentiments. But what happened, beginning from the first coup of January 15, 1966, we began to see semblance of disunity, in quote, within the military, where we have people from a particular section But if you really investigate the coup of January 15, 1966, you will discover that it was not as if that it was conceived as a ethnic coup. It is because of the conspiratorial nature of coups that you speak with people that you have trust in, that eventually accumulated into what we call in quote Igbo coup of January 15, 1966. And if you look at the return march too, you also discover that it was again in quote Hausa Fulani coup. And when you look at composition of people, the major people that carried out the coup, they were particularly from a particular section of the country, and the victims were also from a particular section of the country. But this thing was not giving concretization in one sense to be able to say, oh, these are sectional, ethnical oriented armies that we have in Nigeria. But what that Orkar Coup did was to put everything on table. For the first time, we had official categorical statement from a rank of Nigerian military, a section of Nigerian military, saying that indeed some people are unjustly dominating Nigerian state, and therefore, in fact, it wanted them out of Nigeria. Of course, this was a kind of rebellion, and at the end of that coup, the Nigerian military was not to be the same again.
Was that coup a form of revolution?
In a sense, it's a revolution. It's a revolution because it wants to change the existing order. The thing is that what we need to now evaluate is whether that revolution was a well-prepared one, whether it has the capacity, the machinery with which to change society. Because we are talking about just a section, exclusive section of society being conscientized in quote the officers concerned, not the rank and file of the state.
It was a coup to fight for minority rights in Nigeria.
Very correct.
And the plan was to cut out the Fulani Hausa section of Nigeria out of the country.
Yes, that was the plan. Leaving the Middle East and the southern Nigeria to remain in Nigeria.
State Affairs with Edmond Below is live.
Said, of course, there were powerful non-state political actors in the background, breathing down heavily on the government. Early in 1993, a delegation of the Center for Democratic Studies visited the Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Dasuki, on a transition sensitization visit. After the formalities, the hall was cleared, and the Sultan requested the representatives of the management of the CDS to advise Babangida not to proceed with the election, because according to him, neither MKO Abiola nor Bashir Tofa was qualified to be the president. The management of CDS replied that it was already late to stop the process because the candidates were already on the campaign trail and the nation was expectant. The Sultan said that if the management of CDS could not advise President Babangida to stop the election, he would do himself.
Yes.
That is the Sultan here.
Yeah. There were what I would call powers behind the throne. Although the throne is higher than everybody, but there are also powers behind who, interestingly, were stronger than the throne, more powerful than the throne.
Can the Sultan be that powerful?
It could be that powerful religiously. He is taken as the head of of all Muslims. So that's one area where he could exercise that power and influence. The other is, we said at the beginning that a lie is something you lie because you want to benefit from it. So, or you lie or you believe a lie because it agrees with what you also want, what you were thinking before. So if the Sultan tells Babangida something that agrees with what Babangida wanted, of course, they are collinear. They are in agreement, and therefore he would obey. And I think that there was a lot of that, because spiritual leader, but as we say in politics, there's also politics behind the scene, which sometimes determines issues more than the politics on the scene. That's what they call the astrologia. It's something, there are things that nobody is ever told. Politics works at night most of the time, and politicians are night animals.
Yeah.
So, and you never, there are no minutes of such meetings, and the minutes are in the minds of the participants. So it's a question of what's going on, which is not in the public domain.
Why the night? Because as a political reporter, I even find myself working at night to know what the politicians are doing. Why do they like the night?
They like the night most of the time because they want to exclude other people. Women have been complaining that one of the reasons women are not many in politics is that it's a nocturnal game, and they are not given to that kind of thing. Second reason why it is a night game is that usually after the official meeting that they hold, if you find politicians say, "Hi, how are you? Very good. Where are you going now?" "I'm going home." "Okay, we'll see you later." There's going to be another meeting.
What can you take away from that statement by the Sultan? Do you now feel that the North was afraid of the coming of Abiola?
From what the Sultan was alleged to have said at the meeting with CDS management, he felt that not just the North, but also himself would not benefit from a Southern president, at least not benefit maximally from a Southern president. And so he would also, just like ABN, he would also want Babangida that he knows to continue. So the devil you know is better than the one you don't know.
But Abiola was their friend.
Abiola was their friend. There is also a limit. There are gradations of friendship, hierarchies of friendship. Abiola was definitely a lower hierarchy of friend to the Sultan than Babangida.
But Babangida is not a Fulani.
It's not a Fulani, although at some point he also claimed that he was Fulani from Sokoto. So there was an attempt to be. And if there is that attempt, there will be no limit to such attempts to be accepted.
Yeah, the buffoon. They are not all right. No, see the Uganda man.
Idi Amin.
Hey, look at. They are not all right. In civilized places, they could not be local government head of chairman. So we put the wrong people in the apex position, and the thing is so confused. They sideline the accurately intelligent people. You see, we enthrone mediocres. As it's because of our system. We generally ascribe status, Africans, blacks, we attach importance to it. If you are a child of a natural ruler, a king or something, they assume that you are okay. But the white man and the Mongolian race, the Asians, what they do is to make sure that you achieve status. The more remarkable ones among them will be able to lead the Chairman Mao of this world, the Churchill of this world, and so many others.
Do we still have that problem in Nigeria?
We have.
Do we still enthrone mediocres in Nigeria?
If you can use a word that is worse than mediocre, you have no clue. What type of country is that? Mediocres, we are there. There is something, and what is worse is that the people too are unconcerned. Let me give you an example. People in Nigeria are unconcerned. It's the attitude of the black man. In the House of Representatives, somebody quoted figures how the House was padding money illegally, and you cannot find a country if it's not a black country. And the House, instead of explaining what happened, instead of the government probing it, the House voted and said the person is suspended for 1 year.
Is that part of the black man's dilemma you wrote about?
It's our dilemma. And then it's not possible in many places. In Europe, they will rise like one man and then say, no, it's impossible. But we are here. Even the intelligent ones have been cowed down.
So is docility part of the black man's dilemma?
Yes, it's docility. We are docile. We are not gifted. The most intelligent people are sidelined.
How come the most intelligent people continue to allow themselves to be sidelined?
Yes, because there's one point about that. This is a country, the black people, they are people generally who attach importance to ascribe status, not achieve status. The people who knew they were inadequate were at the helms of affair in many African countries. They do everything desperately through coercion, through free use of public money to entrench themselves.
If you talked about intelligent ones being relegated to the background, does that make them intelligent? Can't they use their intelligence to upstage the so-called mediocres and take over the affairs of the state?
Yes, that is why those of them, they dehumanize many people. Those who are professionals, those who retire in the public service, they could hardly feed themselves. They take away their pension, they don't pay them in time, and at their old age, they suffer.
But the Lee Kuan Yews that you have mentioned,
yes,
as inspirational leaders were leaders who took advantage of their intelligence, then deployed their intelligence to run in the state. How come in the case of Africa, we always find excuses for the so-called intelligentsias? We are discussing the Orkar Coup, military revolution, and the laws of motion. The Orkar Coup came with a difference. You listened to Dr. Oluronti Afoa, the author of the book Destiny Anchored on Faith, the story of General Ladipo Dia. The books mentioned on this show can be ordered from udarabooks.com. We are going to look at 6 books in this edition of the program, and 3 of the authors we feature. You've heard Oluronti Afoa. I will also feature the author of the book, Fellow Countrymen, the story of coup d'etat in Nigeria. I'm talking about Richard Akinola. Babangida was the target of the coup. We will look at Babangida's commentary on the coup as told in his book, A Journey in Service, an autobiography. Richard Akinola was a journalist at the time when the Orkar Coup took place. He has a story to tell. Babafemi Ojudu also covered the Gideon Orkar Coup as a journalist. Babafemi Ojudu is the author of the book Adventures of a Guerrilla Journalist. He will be featuring on this edition of State Affairs. What made the Gideon Orkar special, the Gideon Orkar Coup special? If you read Richard Akinola's book, he makes the point that this was a coup with a difference in the sense that the coup broadcast excised 5 states out of the then 21 state structure of Nigeria. What the coupists wanted to do was to excise 5 states from the 21 states of Nigeria and tell them, go your way, we don't want you to be part of Nigeria anymore until you meet certain conditions. And that was special. Now let's look at the coup speech. The coup speech was broadcast on Radio Nigeria because the coupists captured the radio station. And Gideon Orkar read the coup speech. He starts by saying, fellow Nigerian citizens, on behalf of the patriotic and well-meaning people of the Middle Belt and southern part of this country, I, Major Gideon Gwazo Orkar, wish to happily inform you of successful ousting of the dictatorial, corrupt, drug baronish, inhuman, sadistic, deceitful, homosexually centered, oligarchistic, and unpatriotic administration of General Ibrahim Babangida. Orkar continues, we've equally commenced their trial for unabated corruption, mismanagement of the nation's economy, the murders of Delegiwa, the murders of Major General M.J. Vasa and other officers, as theirs was not an attempted coup, but mere intentions that were yet to materialize, and other human rights violations. So these copists are speaking on behalf of Mama Vasa. We will talk about the Mama Vasa coup at some point. The Mama Vasa coup was the first coup that Babangida encountered as head of state. Mama Vasa was Babangida's friend. Babangida killed his friend for carrying out a coup. Gideon Orkar and others are saying, no, there was no coup, that Mama Vasa did not plan any coup. So that was one of the reasons they also decided to topple Ibrahim Babangida. In the broadcast, Orkar said that the National Guard, already in its formative stage, is hereby disbanded with immediate effect. Decrees number 2 and 47 are also hereby abrogated. We wish to emphasize that this is not just another coup, but a well-conceived, planned, and executed revolution of the marginalized and enslaved people of the Middle Belt and the South, with a view to freeing ourselves and children yet unborn from eternal slavery and colonization by a clique of this country. Who are the clique they are talking about? They named the 5 states that they didn't want to be part of Nigeria anymore. We'll get to that point. Look at another part of the coup speech. Orkar said they've almost succeeded in subjugating the Middle Belt and making them voiceless, and are now extending same to the South. It is our unflinching belief that this quest for domination, oppression, and marginalization is against the wish of God and therefore must be resisted with all vehemence. That is Orkar reading out the school speech. They gave some reasons again. They said one of the reasons for the coup is to stop Babangida's desire to firmly install himself as Nigeria's life president at all cost, and by so doing retard the progress of the country for life. In order to be able to achieve undesirable goal of his, Babangida has evidently started destroying those groups and sections he perceived as being able to question his desires. Examples of such groups already neutralized, pitched against one another. They mentioned the Sokoto Caliphate, the Babangida installed an unwanted sultan. They are talking about Sultan Datsuki. You know, that when Abacha came, Abacha removed Datsuki and brought in Masido. So the Orkar Coupist said the Sokoto Caliphate was being threatened. Then they talked about the destruction of the people of Plateau State. You see what is going on in Plateau at the moment. Perhaps these guys saw it coming. They saw the signs. So they wanted to liberate the Middle Belt and the South. There is massacre going on now in Plateau, in Benue, in Taraba. So perhaps the Orkars saw it coming and they wanted to save the Middle Belt. They stated it clearly. It was clear in the coup speech. If you look at another part of the coup speech, they said another major reason for the change is the need to stop intrigues, domination, and eternal colonization of Nigerian state by the so-called chosen few. This is our view. This, in our view, has been responsible for 90% of our problems as Nigerians. Therefore, they state this cancerous domination has as a factor constituted a major and unpardonable clog in the wheel of progress of the Nigerian state. It will suffice to mention a few distasteful intrigues engineered by this group of Nigerians in recent times. These, they said, one, the shabby and dishonorable treatment meted out to the longest-serving Nigerian general in the person of Lieutenant General Domkat Bali, who in actual fact had given credibility to the Babangida administration. Domkat Bali is from the Middle Belt. Remember when Babangida came in, Domkat Bali was the chief of defense staff. Domkat Bali wanted to be the chief of army staff. Babangida refused. Babangida said, no, you be the chief of defense staff. Abacha was made the chief of army staff. It did not go down well with Domkat Bali because he knew where the power lies. The power lies in the office of the chief of army staff. The power lies in the office. The ultimate power lies in the office of the commander-in-chief. Perhaps Babangida didn't trust him, so he wanted his man, Abacha, to man the office of the chief of army staff. The Kopis were not happy about what happened to Commodore Ibitu Ukiwe. They said here, the disgraceful and inexplicable removal of Commodore Ibitu Ukiwe, Professor Tam David West, Mr. Arrett Adams, and so on, from the service of the state to give way for the most part of the so-called Nigerian ruling elite. They talked about what they called the new pervasive and ongoing retrenchment of Middle Belt and Southerners from public offices and their instant replacement by the favored class and their stooges. They also mentioned the deliberate impoverishment of the people from the Middle Belt and South, making them walking ghosts and feeding on formulas of 010 or 000. That means 1 meal per day. The most controversial part of the Coup broadcast is this part. Listen attentively. Are you there? It is Splash 105.5 FM, the Integrity Station. The program is State Affairs. Listen to this part. The state, in the light of all the above, in the recognition of the negativeness of the aforementioned aristocratic factor, the overall progress of the Nigerian state, a temporary decision to excise the following states from Nigeria. Now, these are the states they wanted out of Nigeria. They didn't want Sokoto to be part of Nigeria anymore. They wanted Borno out of Nigeria. They wanted Katsina, Kanu, and Bauchi states out of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And they wanted that to come effect immediately until the following conditions are met. The conditions to be met to necessitate the reabsorption of the aforementioned states are as follows. To install the rightful heir to the Sultanate, Alhaji Masido, who is the people's choice. To send a delegation led by the real and recognized Sultan, Alhaji Masido, to the federal government to vouch that the feudalistic and aristocratic quest for domination and oppression will never be practiced in any part of Nigeria anymore. Are you there? Hey, we are looking at the Gideon Orkar Coup, military revolution, and the laws of motion. They said to send a delegation led by the real and recognized Sultan, Alhaji Masido, to the federal government to vouch that the feudalistic and aristocratic quest for domination and oppression will never be practiced in any part of the Nigerian state. They gave another condition to reabsorb the 5 states that will be excised from the country. If you look at the condition, perhaps they just wanted those states to leave. And these are the core northern states. Nigeria had 21 states at that time. 21 states at that time. They said in the coup speech, by the same token, all citizens of the 5 states already mentioned, I've mentioned the states, Sokoto, Borno, Katsina, Kano, and Bauchi states. So they said by the same token, all citizens of these 5 states are temporarily suspended from all public and private offices in the Middle Belt and southern parts of Nigeria until the aforementioned conditions are met. They are also required to move down to their various states within 1 week from today. They were making the announcement on the 22nd of April, 1990. So they gave Nigerians from these states 1 week to move back to Borno, Katsina, Bauchi. They said in the same vein, all citizens of the Middle Belt and the South are required to come back to their various states pending when the so-called all-in-all Nigerians meet conditions that will ensure a united Nigeria. A word is enough for the wise, Gideon Orkar said in the coup speech. This part is also interesting. They said we are fully in control of the situation as directed by God. All airports, seaports, and borders are closed forthwith. The former Armed Forces Ruling Council is now disbanded and replaced with National Ruling Council to be chaired by the head of state, service chiefs, Inspector General of Police, and 1 representative each from NLC, NUJ, NBA, and NANS. That also made their coup unique. So they wanted to bring the leadership of NUJ, NLC, NBA, and NANS to be part of the Executive Council. And they called it the National Ruling Council to be chaired by the head of state. So these were their intentions. They launched the coup and they wanted Babangida dead. They were able to kill Babangida's ADC, UK Bello. That's Lieutenant Colonel UK Bello. But Babangida's security guards were able to whisk him out of his residence as the coupists were pounding his residence with bullets, shooting everything on sight. It is the coup of 1990. From reports, more than 40 soldiers were arrested when the coup failed, and they were executed. If you want to read the full coup speech that Gideon Orkar delivered, you will find it in the book, Fellow Countrymen, Story of Coup d'etats in Nigeria, a book written by the renowned journalist Richard Akinola. You will find the book on udarabooks.com. In this book, you will also see the response of the federal government when the coup failed. It is a text of Admiral Augustus I. Como. He made a broadcast on the outcome of the trial of Major Gideon Orkar and others. Let's listen to my chat with Richard Akinola, the author of the book, Fellow Countrymen, the Story of Coup d'etat in Nigeria. You know, even when Babangida met him at Radio Nigeria, while they were negotiating, because by this time, the chief of army staff had given Babangida order to go and dislodge him. That was Danjuma. Was the chief of army staff.
Yes.
You know, the way he negotiated. And I was saying, Dimka, you're not in a hurry to leave here. your coup is failing. You know, it also tells me about the desperation for power. And when they get power under that kind of situation, one can imagine what they would do with it.
Sometimes, because one needs to psychoanalyze what soldiers at that level, how they think. Because go back to the Orkar School, which is, 35 years now, and when Orkar was at Bonnet camp, he refused to run. When his comrade had disappeared, he waited for them to arrest him. And I recall that because I covered the trial at Victoria Island, the Air Force base in Victoria Island, because I stood just in front of them when they were brought to the tribunal, at the opening of the tribunal, and they looked unfazed. In fact, for my contact in the Kirikiri prison, the day they were to be executed, when they were breaking it out, it was the one, according to the warders, it was the one telling them, brace up, guys. So when they were being led to the execution stakes.
Tell me about the Orkar you saw at the court.
He was unfazed, he was unperturbed, and from what I gathered, he said he was not going to say anything until Babangida comes to give evidence that he wasn't going to say anything.
So he didn't say anything?
No. I saw people, young guys, Lieutenant Ode, Captain Imperi, and the rest of them. I saw them. Then Lieutenant Akogo, he was shot. Maybe when he was arrested. He came on a wheelchair. He was shot. He had a POP on his leg. And so I saw people who were just unfazed,
they say Inyam led the coup, but we call it the Orkar coup.
Maybe because Orkar was the one who announced the coup. But Inyam was the most senior. And even from the accounts of Captain Futulofari, I think Major Mukoro was actually the brain behind. It was the brain box of the coup itself. Very brilliant, intelligent officer.
But it was clear that coup wasn't going to fly.
Yeah,
considering the way the military is structured.
Yes, because I think for them to excise some parts of the country, that was stupid.
And they didn't even have anybody that was in command of troops.
Yes, but you see, when you read that book again, Captain Dolofari, I used part of it.
Yeah.
You see, they didn't have command, but they were able to break into the armory that morning, because I witnessed what was happening that day at my 2, because Ojo cantonment was in battleground and the signal barracks in my 2. When they were shooting, they had to keep on dodging, and just to report live what was happening. So it was, and they broke into the armory, both in what's it called, Ikeja cantonment, then Ojo cantonment.
State Affairs with Edmond Below is live.
Yes, you can join the discourse. You can contribute. The numbers to call 070 694 930 00. That's 070 694 930 00. Or 070 144 757 70. 070-144 757 70. Good morning.
Good morning, Edmund.
Good morning.
Yes, on your blue idea, more.
The ball is in your court.
I've commented on your ex. We need 2 revolutions in Nigeria. A revolution that eliminates the corrupt leaders, the visionary leaders, the people that believe in their own self-interest, not the national interest. These are the people that have moved Nigeria backward. And these
See, that line wasn't too clear. That line wasn't too clear. Let's try another line. Please, let's also speak up. Hello, good morning.
Hello, Edmund.
Good morning, Chief
This
Bolariwa.
is your old man, old soldier. Alaji Chief Suleiman. I'm a Bolariwa Ọlọ́run Ṣẹ̀bi Alamori. I will never forget Orkar Coup because that was the time I believe God was really behind me. I now escaped being killed by the revolting soldiers. And I'm sorry for very many innocent soldiers who became victims. Innocent soldiers who didn't know anything, who just suddenly fell to the knees of the rampaging soldiers. You see, what those soldiers were saying, we all knew that the coup will fail. Because how can you just separate some part of the country, saying they do not belong to Nigeria temporarily? We all knew the general soldiers from left and right of Nigeria, that would be fair. The other reason why we knew it was that the all signaling, the communication was still working. I had a phone in my barrack at Asante Barrack. I was the only soldier in that segment that had the telephone line, land phone. There was no GSM that time. I went on fast. I was at Ibadan. My children were in the barracks, and they were receiving calls. So before I could reach barrack that very morning and that very day, it was towards evening. Because by the time I was rushing back to enter the barrack, the soldiers were. It was a friend who said, "Bola. Go back, go." He jumped the fence out. He was running out of Santi Barracks. And that was how they failed. That was how they failed. It was a savior for Nigeria that they failed. Honestly speaking, I cannot narrate my experience, other experience, Edmund. It was terrible. God bless Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you for calling, Baba. Thank you. Join the discourse. The Orkar Coup.
Mr. Edmond.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Sir Chief Guest. Orkar, I've never blamed Orkar. But it's in hurry to be announcing those states. It is when you fully succeeded, you can now voice out your mind. What is your mind? It's in hurry. Are we not seeing the side effect of what he said? You shouldn't blame him because when is what we are seeing now in Nigeria, as if we are not one Nigeria, but we are one Nigeria, especially in the north. You see the migrants that are coming from there to Nigeria that say, we are Nigerians. So the man have no fault to be blamed. When the man have said, and you see, that man is a visionist. He's a visionist. So nobody should blame. When we talk about vision, he's a visionist. Azikiwe is a visionary who have saw Nigeria, but at the end of the day, the people do not allow it to happen. You know, that's something that the man have planned for this country fail. So that Orkar, nobody should blame him because I know it's from the northeast, but he knows what he's talking about. But he was in haste to say so. That's why these people come back and claim that from him. If not, Nigeria could have been better now than what they are talking about because he saw what he saw and it's happening there. It's still happening. All the people we have in this country, those who are in the House of Assembly, those in Senator, everything, most of them are these neighboring countries that is because in this country that is really not in this country. So it's a mistake. And the man that called us now is still saying that, why is he saying so? That's why they brought Buhari for us in the Western region. That's the one who invited Buhari to come and you can see Nigeria have already messed up. The problem I have today is from the Western region, except they change their mindset and follow their brother from the south.
Thank you. Thank you for calling the radio station. You know, some of them escaped. Major Mukoro, the brain behind the coup, the planner, he escaped to America. You know, Great Ogboru, remember that Delta politician, was the sponsor of the coup. He gave everything he had in Nigeria to ensure that the coup succeeded. Ogboru also escaped. Another mastermind of the coup is Major Sowaribi Tulufari. Sowaribi Tulafari. He wrote a book about what happened, and the book is entitled Exploitation and Instability in Nigeria, the Orkar Coup in Perspective. When was the last time you read a book? Find books to read. Buy books. Visit libraries. Borrow books if you can. It will open your mind, enlighten you, and prepare you for leadership in all sectors. Readers are leaders. Visionary leaders. The book Exploitation and Instability in Nigeria, the Orkar Coup in Perspective, is the book of the day. Written by one of the planners of the coup, Sowaribi Tulufari. Say, I want to read from Tulafari's book. You will find these books on udarabooks.com. udarabooks.com. You can order your copy on udarabooks.com. Say, he wrote on page 56. This is what he wrote. Let's read. And if you have any question, please feel free to ask me. You can send your questions on X, on YouTube, on Splash FM Facebook page, on LinkedIn. We are also streaming on State Affairs app. He said, I had countless discussions with Emperi. Emperi is one of those who also carried out the coup. Usually after classes, they were in military school at this time for a training course. He said, while we waited for the horrible meals that were served, or at night, while trying to sedate ourselves with idle talk. However, there was always one serious subject that we never failed to talk about: the River State. He says the River State, its position in the scheme of things in the country, the repression, its position in the scheme of things in the country, the repression, the oppression, and the fraud perpetrated against Rivers people. Remember, by this time, the Ogoni crisis was just simmering. Ken Saro-Wiwa was already out. Tulufari is not from the Middle Belt. He is from the Niger Delta. Remember, the coup was carried out by majorly officers from the minority tribes in Nigeria. Middle Belt and South-South. Tulufari says, the River State, its position in the scheme of things in the country, the repression, the oppression, and the fraud perpetrated against Rivers people. We talked about its oil wells and its neglect and low level of development. We talked about Oloibiri, where oil was first struck in Nigeria, where oil is still drilled, but which conjures the image of a disused and forgotten graveyard. We talked about FINIMA and the politics of the liquefied natural gas project, about Alasa Eleme and the politics of establishing refineries in arid lands with no drop of oil. He was talking about Kaduna refinery. He didn't understand why we should have a Kaduna refinery when there is no oil in Kaduna. So these were the discussions they were having that annoyed them. You know, they were discussing among themselves, military friends. So they continued this discussion until they now agreed, we cannot just continue to talk. Let's strike. Let's make it happen, the Nigeria of our dream. He continues, we discussed the peculiar terrain of the Rivers State, the mangrove swamp, and the plagues of mosquitoes and snakes they bred, the salt water all around, with no fresh water to drink, the heavy rainstorms that destroy the thatched houses in which our people try to shelter themselves. Emperor and I also discussed the representation of our people in the national ruling bodies, our share of ambassadorial appointments, chairmanships, and membership of management boards of federal parastatals. We racked our minds to find one single Rivers man or woman that had the license to export oil but drew a blank. They compiled a list of those who were exporting oil in Nigeria. They could not find anybody from the Niger Delta. And they were getting angry. So what is going on? How come one group is dominating the whole country? And they decided to strike. Look at what he wrote here. He said, we discussed federal projects in other parts of the country, the distribution of federal largesse, and about federal patronage. We wondered how oil money could build from a scratch a city as big and as modern as Abuja in just a few years, while Rivers State remained a one-city state, Port Harcourt. You know, when you hear about Rivers, the only thing you hear is Port Harcourt, Port Harcourt, Port Harcourt. But Rivers is such a big state. So they were saying, how come Rivers is a one-city state? It's not just Rivers. Even like, it's like Nigeria is a two-city state. All the major companies are in Lagos. It tells you something is wrong with the Nigerian economy. All the major companies are in Lagos. Then few multinationals are in Rivers, Akwa Ibom. The bank headquarters are all in Lagos. You can't find that in America. Different states have what stand them out. You can't just say Washington is the all and all in the United States. But in Nigeria, everybody's going to Lagos. You want to buy phone, let's go to Lagos. No bank has its headquarters in the southeast. They are all in Lagos. So if you hold Lagos to ransom now, you have captured the Nigerian state. So they make the point in their discussion. How come oil money could build from the scratch a city as big and as modern as Abuja in just a few years, while Rivers State remained a one-city state, Port Harcourt, itself a small and overpopulated town? We talked about the flooding of the Niger Delta, gradually washing away our villages, which somehow never made the papers, as the flooding of the Bar Beach in Lagos, or the political drought in the north. We discuss oil spillages, for which reason our fathers go on endless fishing trips and come home with empty baskets to starve with their families and live shorter lives alongside the low-cost attacks of farms in the north, which the government annually makes battle preparations for. He continues, we also talked about other things. The Nigerian army, for instance, and the military in general. We talked about its sheer size. We thought it was unwieldy. We talked about its training and immobility and doubted that it could be effective. We talked about the wastage of material. We discussed godfatherism and bootlicking in the military. We discussed the fast-growing stratification of the military along thickly drawn lines of religion, language, and ethnicity, and expressed fears over Nigeria's security. We discussed the relegation of merit and the encouragement of mediocrity. We discussed military-civilian friction. We talked about officers and soldiers who were on the payroll of smugglers and who acted as escorts. Has that changed? You see, these were the things that were agitating their minds that led them to strike. Tolofari continues in his book. We talked about military personnel that were themselves smugglers. We discussed also those who harassed businessmen, legitimate and illegitimate, and extorted large sums of money from them, and those who could be hired by one or the other party in any quarrel to deal with their opponents. And we talked about the corruption and chop at all levels of command in the military. He said, I was deployed to the army headquarters, Provost Battalion, at Ojo Cantonment, where I served until April 22nd, 1990. There, I worked with a number of commanding officers, both in their acting and substantive capacities. If you read his book, you will see where the anger emanated from. Description of how they plotted students of science. Take note. Why did the textbooks I read as a physics student in secondary school? Though this is not the copy I read, I just bought a new copy. The textbooks I read as a physics student in secondary school. So it also applies to politics. The law states, that is Newton's first law of motion, a body will continue in its present state of rest, or if it is in motion, will continue to move with uniform speed in a straight line, unless it is acted upon by a force. What this law is saying, if you have a ball, if you roll the ball, if there are no forces, no air, no friction, no resistance, if you roll a ball, that ball will continue to roll non-stop. The only thing that stops the ball when you kick it is force. The force of the wind, the resistance of the grass. So, if you take a ball into a vacuum where there is no air, nothing, and you roll the ball, Newton's law states that that ball will continue to roll and roll and roll unless it is acted upon by a force. It is that force that will now stop it. He also states that that same ball, if you don't roll it, if there is no force, you just leave it there, the ball will remain in its present state of rest. It will not move. So if you take a ball into a vacuum and you just leave it there, it will be resting. If you roll it, it will continue to roll and roll. And this law has been used in aviation. It has been used by astronauts. The law has never been proven wrong. Now let's apply that law to politics. So I call it Newton's law of motion applied to politics. Physics and politics may seem worlds apart, But Isaac Newton's laws of motion can surprisingly explain how power, resistance, and change work in government. So let's break it down in simple terms. In another way, Newton's first law states, an object in motion stays in motion, and an object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an external force. So what is the political meaning of this law? 1. Governments and leaders tend to keep doing what they've always done unless something forces them to change. Are you there? Governments and leaders tend to keep doing what they've always done unless something forces them to change. I've applied that law to politics. Another application of the law is this. Corrupt systems stay corrupt unless challenged. The ball will remain in a state of rest unless it is acted upon by a force. So corrupt systems will stay corrupt unless they are challenged. That challenge is the force that you will use to act on corruption. Another application of the law is that people stuck in poverty or oppression remain so unless a movement shakes things up. People stuck in poverty or oppression remain so shakes things up